And so there's a lot of cognitive biases that creep in throughout the criminal justice system. The police officers are doing the best. They're not doing this. This is not, corruption. This is not, like I said, the techniques they use to get people to confess to true crimes. There's benefits to getting somebody to confess to a crime that they committed. Let's avoid the trial and all the expense of that, and let's have justice be served. There's benefits to it, and they're trying to do their jobs, but the risk is false confessions for the innocent.
Dr. Henkel, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So I'm really interested to dive into some of your work. So you are a professor at the Department of Psychological and Brain Sciences at Fairfield University, and you have a PhD in cognitive psychology from Princeton. You've done a lot of work on memory, cognition, and false memories, and stuff like that. I'm blanking on something right now, but anything else you'd like listeners to know before we move on?
The PhD is actually from Stony Brook University. I did my postdoc at Princeton for 2 years after I had my PhD.
Okay, good. Sorry about mixing that up.
No worries.
Yeah, so you've done a lot of work on memory, and you've come out with some fascinating insights from that work. So the first thing I wanted to dive into, and you've talked a lot about this, but pictures and memory. So taking pictures changes how we remember things, potentially. I would love for you to give some more details about that.
Yeah, so as somebody who grew up, my father was a photographer. We were surrounded with photos, absolutely love looking at photos. And, with the advent of digital photography, we carry these cameras around, take pictures all the time, and we just amass them. And I had run some prior research on how looking at photos can shape what people remember about things. But I got really curious as to how the act of actually taking photos shapes what people remember. We have this beautiful museum at the Fairfield University campus, and I brought students over there, and they looked around at some objects of art, and some they just looked at, some they took photos of, and then I'd bring them back over to the lab a couple days later and ask them what they remember. And it turned out that they remembered fewer objects of art and fewer details about those objects of art for the ones that they took photos of rather than the ones that they just looked at. And so I referred to this as the photo taking impairment effect. And it's the idea that sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes when we take photos, we're more focused on, okay, so the camera's got it. I don't have to think about this anymore, right? So people sometimes call that cognitive offloading when we count on something else to remember for us. It could be another person. It could be writing it down on a Post-it note. But we kind of view the camera as, well, the camera's got it. Now I can focus my time and attention on something else. And so what happens is when we expect the camera to capture that for us, we don't engage in the kind of elaborative processing that would help us remember things. How does it make me feel? What does it remind me of? We kind of view, here's my trophy. Oh, I made it to the Mona Lisa. Here's my selfie. And then I move on instead of thinking about it. So there's the kind of expectation that the camera remembers for us. And then there's that kind of attentional disengagement. You're not fully paying attention to what's right in front of you. You're paying attention to what you're capturing, and even more so you're not attending to the visual details as much. But many times we're so focused on, I'm going to post this on social media. I wonder what comments I'm going to get. How many people like this? And when we think about that, we're now thinking about our self, how our self is presented. And when we focus on what are people going to think of me, I'm not paying any attention to the Mona Lisa now. I'm more interested in, do I look fabulous? Does everybody say, oh, that's a great color on you? Instead of, wow, what is it like to view this great work of art? And what kind of emotional experience is it for you? And so sometimes when we take photos of things, we're doing things that are going to be real barriers to us to be able to remember that later on.
It's not uncommon to hear picture taking as memory capture, essentially, like capturing memories. So academically, how is memory defined? Is it just like a reference point to something in the past?
So, what is memory is a
Yeah.
really big question. And I'll tell you, it drives me crazy when people talk about photos being memories. They're not
Mhm.
memories. What the camera captures is not even remotely close to what the human brain is doing and what the act of remembering is.
Right.
So, memories are changes in the neuronal structure of our brains and the chemical connections between those neurons that's storing and representing information. And we often have this view of it almost like it's a file cabinet. Like, here's this little video clip of this experience I had and I filed it away. And here's this little factoid and I filed it away. Our memories are much more malleable than that. Every time we reactivate a stored memory, we are activating it and new information is attaching itself to it. Things that we didn't talk about drop out of it. So when I had an experience, suppose I took a beautiful hike and I took a beautiful picture of this waterfall, and then I'm talking to my friends afterwards, and I was really talking about, oh my gosh, I dropped my water bottle. It went rolling down the hill. I almost fell into the waterfall. And I might exaggerate some elements of this and leave out other elements. Each
Mm.
time I tell that story, I'm reshaping the memory. Somebody might bring something in. They might say, oh my gosh, I always loved, your purple water bottle. And maybe it wasn't my purple water bottle, but now that purple water bottle has attached itself to his memory. And the next time I talk about this memory, I've now taken this misinformation and incorporated it into it. So our memories are very malleable, and they should be. We have to update them with new information. They're not meant to be veridical versions of our experiences. They're meant to be an experience that we had that captures some elements of it and that can be edited and re-edited over time.
We have more phones. I mean, everyone has a phone in their pocket right now. And I mean, we have more pictures than we can ever really take the time to appreciate. So, does that mean we're remembering less now than we ever have before?
It's an interesting way to look at it, because some of the research that I've done really emphasizes the importance of looking at those photos afterwards. Taking photos, the act of taking photos, if you don't use those photos later on as
Mm.
memory cues, they're not going to be all that helpful. So photos can be wonderful memory cues.
Yeah.
But if you've taken 10,000, 20,000. I have really cute grandchildren and really cute cats, and I have a lot of photos of them.
Yeah.
And what winds up happening is, am I really paying attention to what's going on here? And am I going to look at those photos later on? So I was really surprised when I was trying to go through some old photos when my son was growing up. He played hockey, he played soccer. I used to videotape, oh, here's his hockey game. Those
Yeah.
videos are really boring to look back on. You can barely see him. There's a helmet. I have to look for his. I think that's him over there. They're not really very good videos. A couple minutes of him talking to the camera, being like, I'm going out and playing this team, that would probably be a more fun thing. But the documenting every moment of our lives, I don't think it's going to be all that useful later on. And in particular, the kind of cues that you're providing. So many people take pictures of their food. Here's a picture of a plate of spaghetti.
Yeah.
And, if you've only eaten one plate of spaghetti in your life, then 50 years from now, when you look back, you'll be like, that's that plate of spaghetti that I had. But otherwise, what would be a far more memory evoking picture is you with the outfit that you're wearing, with the restaurant in the background, the person you were with at the time, and that plate of spaghetti, because then you have more cues to trigger. That was the time we went into Greenwich Village and we ate at that really amazing Italian place, and John Lithgow was sitting right at the table across from us. And, those are going to be better cues to reactivate that memory. So amassing tons of photos that we're never going to look at isn't going to help us. Taking photos of things that just have no real context to them, the number of shots of, here's my pedicured toenails and here's the beach.
Yeah.
I dare you 50 years from now to take those 30 different versions of that photo and remember anything specific from that particular. You won't even remember what beach it was. So context helps.
Yeah. And it seems, I was listening to another interview, and it seems like professional photographers don't necessarily have this same problem because they're putting a lot more presence and attention into what they're actually taking a picture of. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I heard when my study on the photo taking impairment effect came out, I had so many emails from people interested in this and so many professional photographers. I remember every photo I've ever taken. And I'm like, of course you do, because you paid attention. You were so engaged. You thought about it ahead of time. You thought about it afterwards. You looked at the photo afterwards. Those are all things that our cognitive systems need to be able to remember things. We pay attention. We process it in a deep, meaningful way, thinking about it, reflecting on it, afterwards, reminiscing, sharing,
Yeah.
reviewing those memories. Those are all the things that are going to keep us with rich, detailed memories that oftentimes bring a lot to our lives. Our memories can almost be used as medicine, reminiscing about the good times that you had when you're dealing with some really sad times, remembering happy things, feeling connection with loved ones who are gone. Our memories can be really good medicine for us. But if all we have is just, I've got 10,000 photos and I don't even know where to begin to look through them, how are you going to get the benefits of it?
So, you mentioned taking a bunch of photos of the same thing, and I'm wondering, does that help memory or hurt it? Because if you take 30 images of something and it's because, so if somebody has me to take, if somebody stops me and says, "Can you take a picture of me and my friends?" I'm going to take 20 pictures because I don't care that much. And I'm like, here's 20, you figure out which
Yep.
ones are good.
Yeah.
Am I helping them? Because then they have to look at them and analyze them and decide which ones are good.
Yeah, but that process actually is and what they should do is delete the bad ones
Yeah.
or at least make a folder, a separate folder, right? So if we cull our photos down, I have not stopped despite the photo taking impairment effect. Like I said, Evan and Alessandra, my grandkids, click, click, click. I take so many photos of them. They're so cute. But couple times a year, I actually go through those photos and I move them into a folder called Best of.
Mm,
And I take and I look at them and I remember and I take a particularly good photo. 20 years from now when they want to look back on their childhood, they don't have to sort through 5 million photos.
yeah.
Here's a subset of those. I put them into a folder. I actually print them out. I use one of those commercial services and print them out into books so I can sit and look at the book. And I love that. But so the act of culling our photos, going through, reminiscing about them, picking out the good ones, those are all things that are going to actually benefit memory because you're more engaged again. You're paying attention, you're thinking about it. And so yeah, I don't think you're hurting the people when okay, I took 5 shots of that. And also because inevitably somebody's always got the stupid face or close their eyes and you stand a better chance of getting a good shot of everybody.
Does the quality of the photos matter?
Probably not that much. That's a great question. There's no research I know of that really deals with the quality of the photos. So think back in the day. I mean, the photos were much less quality. The prints that I have from 50 years ago when I was a child, they're physically fading.
Yeah.
they're less crisp. But I can make out enough details, and I'll zoom in. One of my favorite things is I love looking at either birthdays or the holidays. My parents were taking pictures of me, my brother, and sister in front of the tree, but all our toys are scattered behind us. And that's what I meant before about when I said about context. I look at that doll or I look at the box, or my brother used to get these gas stations, these metal gas stations every year.
Yeah.
And so looking at those things, oh my gosh, he loved playing with Matchbox cars. And that triggers things that aren't in the photos. Oh, I remember when my brother got that racetrack, that electric racetrack. So it'll trigger things that aren't there. So I think memories can be evoked even from photos that have degraded, kind of in quality. I don't think it's about the quality. I think it's about what's in the photo that taps into something that's in here that brings that memory out to the forefront and allows you to have the experience of remembering it. Because there's a lot of stuff in here that we don't retrieve, we're not getting out, we don't remember them.
So it sounds like presence. You be present when you're taking a photo, even, and then culling the ones that are not really necessary. I get this all
Yeah.
the time. I have 3 pictures, they look the exact same. Decide, keep one and delete the rest. Um, so reviewing the photos can help the memory too. Is there like a timeline for this? Like, does it have to be right away? Can it be a month, a year?
Yeah. When you have an initial experience, it takes time to encode, get the information in, right? So you're having the initial experience, you're encoding it, but then it takes time to actually consolidate it, to take it and make it into a long-term memory. And so the brain is sort of, it's got a whole bunch of things bouncing around here. There's this phenomenon in psychology they refer to as event segmentation, and it is the idea that when we sort of chop things up into time related periods or context dependent periods, it actually gives your brain an opportunity to be like, okay, gel that all together. So I'm going to give you an example. You're on vacation and you've just traveled all around Rome. You've gone here, you've gone there, you've gone all over the place. You've taken a ton of pictures. The best thing that you could do for your memory, you get back to your hotel that night, look through those photos, pick a couple of them, write a couple things about them, and you're going to consolidate that. When you go to sleep at night, your brain consolidates your memories. That's one of the things that happens during sleep. And you've kind of ended that day. And here's day one and the things that we did. And now here's day two. And if you instead, here's day one and I did this and then I collapsed in bed and then I got up and I did this and this and this and then, and it's all one big trip, it's harder for your brain to consolidate those memories. So that event segmentation, kind of chopping it up, the event hit a beginning and it hit an end, and that was day one, and that actually can benefit memory. So doing that soon after experiences helps, and then from time to time after that, so if you really do want to keep memories accessible, you don't need to look at every single photo you have every single year, but if you don't look at something for 20, 30 years, it's, like I look back at some photos, it's like, I don't know who that person is in that picture. I have no idea who that person is. I don't even know where I was,
Yeah.
and other ones I'll try to deduce, or I'll remember it very clearly. So rehearsal, the act of remembering things really does benefit memories and keeps them more vivid and fresh. There's not a prescribed time course
Yeah.
for it, but like I said, it does help to kind of give that little booster of
Right.
consolidation in there by not having this long, continuous stream of chaos.
And it sounds like from another interview I heard of yours that editing photos can actually alter the memory a bit. So,
Yeah. So Anna Milliken, one of my students here at Fairfield University, she's working on a PsyD program now. So she's going to become a clinical psychologist. She was very interested in this with me, and so part of her senior project, we started looking at what happens when you edit your photos. So when you chop things out of your photos, you change the colors on them with color changing filters. And this was just very preliminary work that we published. I still have a bunch of work that I've been working on over the past couple of years that I'm hoping to finish analyzing and get it written up. But the initial work that we did, what it was showing is it wasn't so much the act of editing the photo, chopping the person out of the photo. It was looking at the photo later on that was what was going to shape your memory. So if I chopped out, the water bottles here in the shot, but I chopped it out or I chopped that person out, it's not the act of doing that edits the memory. It's the looking at the photo later on again and that information not being there anymore. And so over time, you're going to forget that person was there. You're going to forget the information that was left out. And as you continue to kind of reshape that memory is you pull it up, and you kind of keep it in that state where you're, kind of making it more malleable. It's going to just focus on the things that are there. And so the photos are going to almost be like a funnel, a funnel that narrows down what we remember about things. So yeah, we did find evidence that looking at your edited photos makes you remember this is what I experienced rather than what you actually experienced.
it sounds like maybe you haven't gone too deep into this yet, but I'd be really curious about like self-perception and that. Like if people are using filters or they're really specific about angles or they're photoshopping to slim themselves down or change their appearance, do they start to actually believe that's what they looked like at the
I
time?
know it's a great question. I don't have an answer based on research yet on that, but we do know that people's self image, really can be affected by what they see, the external feedback that they're getting, right? So when they're looking at photos, they see themselves. Many people see themselves as larger than they actually are, and it leads to all sorts of body dysmorphia because we just look a little bit bigger in photos than we are in and we can't see ourselves otherwise other than from a mirror or a photo. I can't see my face otherwise. But you can get people very, very focused on their external appearance, and really focusing so extensively on that. So I can imagine that it can feed into people with some mental health issues or eating disorders and things like that. They won't see what's in the photo, by the way. So somebody with anorexia, they're going to look at their photo and be like, "Oh my God, look at how." Full my cheeks are. And it's like no other human being looks at you and sees that. They're seeing somebody very gaunt and somebody who needs help because this is really unhealthy. So their perceptual systems are going to distort things. And that's the interesting thing with photos. We treat photos as if they're a version of reality, right? Um, they're not, as you mentioned, the lighting, the filters, the angle. They're an interpretation of reality. They're not reality. So the photo isn't the truth and nothing but the truth. In addition, we're filtering everything through our cognitive systems. I pay more visual attention to the things that interest me or things that are bright, things that are moving, things that are changing. That's how our visual systems work. I have expectations about what I expect to see. I ignore things that don't fit in with what I expect, and I pay more attention to things that fit in with what I expect. I rehearse the things more that fit in with my view of myself as this person. So our memories are not veridical versions of reality at all. Photos aren't veridical versions of reality at all. Everything is an interpretation of it. So when we're looking at a photo, it's already an interpretation, and now we're interpreting this interpretation of it. And the real fun comes in now with photos because the latest line of cameras, so that the latest iPhone, it has multiple cameras in it. And when it takes a picture, it's averaging what its algorithm puts together as the best shot. It's not actually the shot of what happened out there. So these cameras that we have now are one more step removed from click, I just captured what exactly happened. They're already averaging those things together, and coming up with an amalgam, and that's the photo.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I've seen videos, I mean, on my own camera where I take videos and it's like the depth and stuff, it seems a little weird and it's like that's not how it actually looks and that's it
Yeah,
looks a little artificial to a certain degree.
yeah.
So, can people I've seen people, maybe they're at a concert or something like that and they seem to be having a fairly miserable time. And then, they're with their friends and they decide to do their selfies and have their pictures where they're all smiling and stuff like that. Can these pictures actually cause people to think they had a better time than they actually did when they look back? And it seems like that can set them up for disappointment. Let's say you hate Disneyland, but you take really smiley pictures every time you go there. Could you start believing that you have a good time even though you don't?
Yeah, it's a great question. In theory, that could happen.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to tell you about one of the studies that I had run. Um, I had gotten interested. You had mentioned some of my specializations earlier, and false confessions.
Yeah.
I had gotten interested in this subset of cases where people falsely confessed to a crime that they didn't commit, where they actually, even if it was just for a few moments, started to believe that they committed this crime, that the police interrogated them in such a way that eroded their own trust in their memory, that took in information that the police officers were inadvertently feeding them about the crime scene, about the crime, and they actually created an internalized version where they remember, having committed this crime that they did not in fact commit.
Yeah.
And one of the techniques that police officers might use is showing them crime scene photos. And so I got interested in the idea of, hey, if you look at photos that provide evidence of something, will that make you think that that thing really happened? So this all sounds really exciting. The study itself is very basic laboratory research study, but this is how scientists answer research questions here. So I didn't have people falsely confessing to crimes per se. I brought people into the lab and they experienced a whole bunch of different events. Pour the sugar packet onto the plate, put the spoon in the cup, break the toothpick, you draw a circle with the pencil. So I would have them complete some actions, and then I would ask them to imagine completing other actions. So maybe they didn't really draw a circle with a pencil. Maybe they didn't type the word cat on the computer. Or maybe they didn't break the toothpick, right? They just imagined doing it. So a bunch of actions that they did, a bunch of actions that they imagined doing. And then later I brought them back and I showed them photos of actions in their completed state. So let's just suppose you imagine breaking a toothpick. You didn't actually do it, but I show you a photo of a broken toothpick and I show it to you several times. Then I bring you back another week or so later. I don't remember the exact time course in the study. And I say, I want you to tell me what you did the first day here. Tell me those actions you actually completed. If I showed you a picture of the broken toothpick several times, you would be much more likely to falsely claim, I remember breaking the toothpick, to falsely confess to committing this everyday simple action. This is very different than I falsely remember stabbing my sister to death. That's a very different emotional memory with a lot more action involved in it. But I could get people in a laboratory setting with high confidence, saying that they remember, they say, oh, it's very vivid. And what happens is the photo, you remember the photo, the evidence, and you remember mentally going through breaking a toothpick, and you put those two things together. So my very, very early research in memory dealt with what's called source monitoring. It deals with the notion that how do we tell where this memory came from? Did it come from my actual actions in the outside world? Did it come from my imagination? Was it this person that said it or that person that said it? Was it something I read in Star magazine or something I heard on a reputable news source, as if there's any reputable news sources anymore? And so what are the different sources for this memory that I have here? And in my very early research, I had discovered, according to the source monitoring framework, we don't store tags of where these memories came from. We engage in these judgment processes. We activate the features of our memory and we make judgments about it. And what I had argued and found evidence from is that we will take some experience and confuse it with aspects of another experience. So if you imagined a black and white line drawing of a lollipop and actually saw a black and white line drawing of a magnifying glass, you would take those features of that round thing with a stick underneath it, and that imagined lollipop all of a sudden became much realer to you. I saw a lollipop. I know I saw a lollipop with high confidence. Yeah. And so this is referred to as feature importation. The features that allow us to determine where a memory came from can come from our imagination, from other similar experiences. And that's why we make these memory mistakes sometimes. A lot of the memory errors that we make are what are referred to as source monitoring errors. So we get confused about where this memory originated from.
Yeah, I think, when I was thinking about the question of what is memory, I was thinking of imagination too, because if you sit here imagining something, a fake situation, and then later, how do you know that's not a memory? Like it seems kind of hard to differentiate because our minds are very powerful, and there are mistakes made all the time.
Absolutely. The brain doesn't care where it came from. So when we visually imagine something, when we picture what something looks like, we're going to activate the visual cortex, the part of our brain that is involved in visual perception. When we're imagining the sounds of a song or imagine the sounds of keys jangling,
Right.
auditory cortex, the temporal lobes are going to be activated. So imagery and perception use the same parts of the brain. Our memories, when they're stored, like I said, they don't have little tags. This came in from seeing, this came in from hearing, this came in from my imagination. Our brains don't store tags for where these memories came from. They judge it based on the quality of the features, also based on our general knowledge. So I love Bob Dylan. Love, love, love Bob Dylan. I fantasize, what would it be like if I ever met Bob Dylan? What would I say to him? What would that be like? If I have a memory of meeting Bob Dylan, I know it's imagination because I know I've never met Bob Dylan. So I could use my reasoning to judge this memory is it's just a daydream that I've had.
Right.
But sometimes our imagined memories, they're really easy to generate. So I
Right.
always love telling the story about the time my brother fell off the stage playing the trombone when he was a little boy. Fell off the stage, trombone went flying, his chair went flying, the music stand went flying, everything went flying, and then he put everything back on. It was hilarious. I mean, even just the sound, the crash, bang, boom. I actually wasn't there, according to my mother, and it actually makes sense that I wasn't there. I would have been out in the hallway waiting for my part of the elementary school concert. But I have this vivid memory because I took her story, which
Yeah.
was vivid, and it was easy for me to imagine. I know my brother. I could totally picture this happening. So when you take something that's vivid and it's easy to imagine, it's got all the features that actually perceived memories have. So it's no wonder that we mistakenly say, I saw that. I remember that clear
Yeah.
as day. Yeah, we steal each other's memories all the time. We hear stories and swear we're there, and people like, you weren't there. And those are source errors.
Yeah, I've had that happen a few times. I can think of one friend he would claim I was there after hearing a story a couple times, and my other friend who was definitely there was a part of the story. We'd be like, after we'd leave the room, he wasn't there, right? No, he definitely wasn't. But he heard the story a few times, and he would start
Yeah,
inserting himself. Yeah, I know, I was there. You don't have to tell me. It's like,
yeah,
okay. It's
yeah.
always seemed a little bizarre, but hearing you talk about it, it makes sense now.
Yeah, and it's part of the notion that our memories need to be updatable. Our memories are a functional part of us, right? They serve functions. They allow us to make decisions, to act quickly, remembering things. This is poisonous. Don't go there. That's dangerous. This is
Yeah.
healthy. This is not healthy. We rely on our memories all the time. But we can't, like, could you imagine if you always had to remember your junior high locker combination
Yeah.
before you got to what your current locker combination is? We need to get rid of some of those old memories. We also need to update our memories because what we felt like the experience was, our perspective changes over time. As grown-ups, we see things a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Even just the size of things, like when you go back to your elementary school, everything seems so small because you were small. And the teachers there, they seem like such grown-ups. They were probably 27 years old. They could
Yeah.
have been even younger, and yet they seemed like they were 80 to you.
Yeah, I didn't really think about this stuff too much until I read Mistakes Were Made But Not by Me a few years back. And with the false confession stuff, which that's the category I forgot to mention at the beginning where I blanked out. Uh, false confessions are really interesting because you would think when everything's on the line, when your freedom is literally on the line, if you say the wrong thing, for somebody to say, yeah, no, like to eventually change their story to say, yeah, I did that. I killed that person or whatever it might be. Like it admitting to a crime you didn't do seems completely illogical. And before understanding this a little bit more, it just seems like something that why would this happen?
Yeah, it does. It absolutely seems unfathomable that somebody would confess to a crime that they didn't commit. These confessions rarely happen spontaneously. They're after hours of interrogations that are designed to wear you down. Because the fact of the matter is, guilty people don't want to confess. Police officers are left with this dilemma, right? Because that people lie to them and they don't want to tell them what really happened. So they have to use techniques, right? That get the person talking about this. The risk of some of those techniques, though, is they can take an innocent person and have them create a story. Now, most of the false confessions don't fall into that category where the person thinks they actually did it. Most of the false confessions, Saul Kasem's done just decades of research on this. He refers to these as coerced, compliant confessions. The person gets worn down by the system. They'll say whatever you want to say, and they genuinely they think, and you'll just let me go now. I'll straighten this out later. I'll get a lawyer. We'll straighten this out. I know I didn't really do it. So they just say that to you. But a subset of cases, as I mentioned, where they actually doubt their own memories enough to believe that they had done this, even if it's just momentarily, to open up that window. There was a case, I just want to glance down so I can say the gentleman's name correctly. I think I wrote it down. Yeah, Thomas Perez. This was a 2018 case in Fontana, California. The video of this case is so unbelievably heartbreaking. This is a man who, he lived with his father, and his father had gone out for a walk and then was gone. And he called the police and he's like, my dad has some health problems. Could you go around the neighborhood and look for him? And then they came into his house, and for whatever reason, they got very suspicious of him, became convinced that he killed his father, brought him in, started interrogating him about it. At one point, they bring a family friend in who they say to this guy, look, we know he killed his father. You got to get him to confess. Now, imagine a trusted family friend coming in and being like, what happened? They have all this evidence. You did this. He starts literally just losing his ability to understand what reality is. This case got so bad. And this part, I don't know what about this broke my heart more than anything. They brought the guy's dog in and basically said, this dog witnessed the crime. We're going to have to put your pet to sleep because your pet is traumatized by what you did. The man is now laying on the floor, hugging his dog, believing that these police are about to kill his dog. And all this evidence is just coming at him again and again. And he's like, I guess I killed my father. I must have stabbed him. And he just starts feeding him. And he gives this false confession here. It is heartbreaking. His father was actually alive. His father had gone on a plane, had gone and visited his sister. The guy got put into, mental health facility. And I don't even know how many days he was there before they told him, oh, guess what? Your dad's actually alive. Like, they knew his father was alive and didn't tell him. Like, the case is mind boggling. And there's video of some of the interrogation. It's not in your best interest to confess to something that you didn't do, but there are circumstances that can erode your own trust. These lengthy periods of questioning, this self-doubt, showing vivid photos again and again of crime scenes. And then you start building up memories of it, the repetition. The young boy, Michael Crow, who was 14 years old when he falsely confessed to killing his sister. And he didn't kill his sister. It was the constant repetition by the cops, that I guess I stabbed her. I guess I did. Like, you can't even believe that this isn't, everybody that is telling you this is what happened, and it erodes your own ability to judge what's real or not. And it seems unfathomable. And in fact, this is one of the problems with confessions. I had run this survey at one point. People understand that false confessions can happen, but not them. They would never falsely confess. And we refer to this in psychology as the fundamental attribution error. The idea that guy who just cut me off on the highway is a jerk. I sped up to get around here because I'm in a hurry. I have a reason. We know our own reasons, so we afford ourselves judgments about it's the situation that made me behave badly. But when we judge other people, oh, that person's a jerk. That's their disposition. They're just a jerk, instead of thinking about that. So we think, I would never falsely confess. So when you're faced with a confession in court and the person's defense is arguing, no, it was a coerced confession, you're like, it's murder. Who would confess to murder? You falsely confess to something. The nail is in your coffin. It is really, really hard to undo that. So when there's a confession, it's likely to lead to conviction, even when it's not corroborated. And it changes the police also. They come in there with this guilt presumptive process. They assume you're really guilty. My job is to get you to admit to this. But it filters how they pay attention to the other evidence. They ignore other clues that might lead them to the actual suspect because they're so sure that they know what's happening here. And so there's a lot of cognitive biases that creep in throughout the criminal justice system. The police officers are doing the best. They're not doing this. This is not, corruption. This is not, like I said, the techniques they use to get people to confess to true crimes. There's benefits to getting somebody to confess to a crime that they committed. Let's avoid the trial and all the expense of that, and let's have justice be served here. There's benefits to it, and they're trying to do their jobs, but the risk is false confessions for the innocent.
Well, I'm a good cop, and I wouldn't be interviewing you if I didn't have good cause to be interviewing you, right? Like, there's a reason I'm interviewing you. I'm a good cop. I don't just interview, innocent people for no reason. Is that kind of what's going on in their head?
Right, in general, but as we know, there are all sorts of biases that make you think, I know you did this.
Yeah.
If you're not guilty of this, you're guilty of something else. I think back to do you remember the Central Park jogger? Oh, you're too young. But you probably know of the
No,
case, the Central
story,
Park
yeah.
jogger case and the Central Park Five. And so that was like five false confessions from these teenage boys. They were teenage boys in the park, and some of them may have had some trouble with the law before, and they may have been up to no good doing things in the park, but they were not the people who raped this woman. They
Mhm.
didn't do those things. But the cops from the get go, they knew they had the right people, and they were going to get them to confess, and they did. They elicited five false confessions from very vulnerable, youth, teenagers, and they served serious time for their
Yeah.
crimes before they were exonerated.
Do certain states of mind elicit false memories more easily? Like, I think of, like, if I get in a passionate argument with my girlfriend or something, I might say something and I don't realize exactly what I said even a moment later. So are certain states of mind more prone to not remembering things correctly?
Yeah, so if you're in stress and arousal to a certain degree will benefit memory because you're paying attention, right? But too much stress and arousal is very disruptive for memory. So the hippocampus is a structure in the medial temporal lobes that helps us consolidate our current experiences into long-term memories, to take these experiences, glue them together, send them to the different parts of the brain, and kind of send all the stuff in there that gels those memories. High levels of stress disrupt the consolidation process. And so what happens is it's fragmented pieces. You've just been through this traumatic, intense experience, and it's sort of fragmented pieces. And then you get a bad night's sleep, and you don't have the normal consolidation process. And then you get up, and you got more stuff you got to deal with, and it's all. It really disrupts the consolidation processes. So high levels of stress, can lead to very inaccurate memories. Being really vested in something can also lead to inaccurate memories. That very narrow funnel that I was talking about, you only see things from a certain way, unwilling to entertain the possibility that you could be wrong. I would certainly remember it if I said it, like
Yeah.
those kinds of things. There are some also individual differences. So people who are more prone to dissociate when something really stressful is happening and they're kind of mentally someplace else, then they're not encoding the experience very richly. And that leaves a lot of opportunity for memory distortions to creep in also.
Does Some people are more narrative driven, so they think in narratives, and rather than taking the details and isolating things and trying to flesh out what's going on with each situation. Some people are more, they buy into a narrative that they build around something. And narratives are very useful in a lot of cases, but can being narrative driven affect that?
Yeah, so the narrative, right, is going to create this structure, and once you've put that structure in place, it's hard to undo it. It's hard to update it, even if you realize you were wrong. That isn't, you weren't really there, or that other person wasn't there, but it's so clear in your memory, and so the narratives. it's going to make you tell the same story again and again. It's going to really firm up those pieces, and you're going to have fairly high confidence, and we can be very, very confident and very, very wrong.
Yeah.
And I do this all the time. My sister loves to joke with me about some memory expert. She's sure I'm wrong about this. And I'm like, I at least could tell you why it is I could be wrong, but I still have the subjective experience of, no, this is how I remember it. And I'm sure this is the way that it happened, even though I know in theory I might
Yeah.
not be so right.
We've always had a problem with disinformation and misinformation, but now we have AI potentially making it infinitely worse because I can generate an image with a politician in a compromising situation or just something that has never happened before. And, people can do this with basically no technological knowledge. Um, so, how can people protect themselves from misinformation and disinformation in this age where the technology allows it that much easier?
Yeah, it's a real danger. So there's the doctored photos, the deep fakes, that can be very compelling. And even before them, there was a decades of research on what's called the illusory truth effect. It's the idea that if you repeat a statement enough, it increases how accessible it is in your brain. So they refer to this as fluency. It's a fluent piece of information. It comes to mind readily. So if you have a rumor, about some movie star, that this person had an affair with that person, and you say it enough times, people start to believe that it's true. So one of the studies, the only study I've ever published with my husband, Mark Mattson, so Henkel and Mattson, we looked at the illusory truth effect. Many dozens of people, hundreds of people have looked at this before us, but I was particularly interested in from the source perspective. So we had people read these little factual statements about things, like you would just make up, I use real statements as well as fake statements, but just, I'm going to use a classic one from the literature, that the comedian Bob Hope's father, was a fireman, a firefighter. And so if I said that several times, it increases the later likelihood of you believing it's true. And so later on, you might not remember having heard that statement before, but if I asked you on a scale of 1 to 10, how true do you think this statement is? You're going to have this illusion of truth because it comes to mind easily. You're able to process it easily. And so we played around within the study with, well, here's some information from a kind of unreliable source. A lot of the stuff they say isn't accurate. Here's information that is fact checked. It comes from a really reliable source. And it turns out over time, it doesn't matter if it came from an unreliable or a reliable source because you don't remember the source. You just get that increase of fluency. And so even though you knew the statement was coming from an unreliable source, when it's repeated several times later on down the line, you're more likely to believe that it's true. And so repetition brings an illusion of truth. So that happened even before we had all these deep fakes. What these deep fakes do is they give you even more compelling visual information that you remember. No, I remember it. Look, I can picture this. There was a great series of studies where I want to see if I can recall the details correctly here. I cannot. I can't even remember the name of the researcher, but it involved footage of a crime in some other country that there was no existing footage of it, but people remembered seeing it. Similar to like for 9/11, people might remember footage of the planes going into the buildings or things like that, where there is no existing footage, but they swear they remember it. So people can falsely remember seeing things that they've imagined multiple times, and so we can believe that we've seen things, but when you take things that you have actually seen that didn't happen, that's going to make it even more compelling. Those repeated pictures, just like that picture of the broken toothpick, makes you think I broke the toothpick. So these deep fakes are really creating illusions of truth, and all the AI stuff, it is burying reality under, it's predictive text. AI doesn't know or understand anything. It's using predictive text, guessing what the next word might be. based on limited information, and yet that's what's coming up in all our search engines. And we think it's true. We assume it's true, just like we look at a photo and assume it's true. Having a more skeptical mind, fact checking things, being willing to go beyond, this is consistent with what I believe, therefore it must be true, and I'm not going to pay attention to other things. So like if a big news story had come out and I want to find out quickly what happened, I'll go to CNN and Fox News. But I look at both of them, they're going to have different versions of the story. I might be a little closer to the truth. If I really want to get closer to the truth, I'll probably go to BBC, who might not have as much vested in it, and maybe I'll get a little bit closer to what really happened here. And so yeah, we've got so much information coming at us, and so much of it is, some of it's innocent mistakes, misinformation, but some of it is deliberate, and we are being buried under disinformation. And it has real effects on people. It's eroding people's sense of trust in science and authorities. Why do you need an authority when you could play Dr. Google yourself? I don't need a doctor to tell me this. I can research my own symptoms. People who have no knowledge of economics versus people who have spent a lot of time studying economics, people who have spent a lot of time studying the climate. And I understand in any field, there's the majority, and there's some people who disagree with them. There's well-trained scientists who do not agree with the vast majority of scientists who say things are changing in our climate. There's a handful of well-trained scientists who say no, and that's the beauty of the scientific process. It's self-correcting. We can challenge those views, we can look and examine them, and we can come closer to the truth there. But yeah, all the disinformation is eroding trust in science, eroding trust in expertise. We're all experts if we have the internet that is fed to us by algorithms that are not the truth. Who's writing those algorithms and what's their agenda and what's being blocked from these search engines? It's not benign, and I hate to sound conspiracy theory driven. It's not innocent or benign.
Well, I mean, I think there's I can't remember his name, but the guy who was in charge of Nazi propaganda, I think he was famous for saying, you repeat a lie enough times and everyone will believe it. So, I mean, even though the research obviously doesn't have ill intentions, but it's also available to people with malicious intentions just as easily.
Yeah. And there's been enormous research on misinformation and disinformation over the past 10 years or so, and really trying to better understand it and what can be done to combat it. Should we just flag it? This may or may not be true. There's been great progress made on that front. But in the United States, a lot of that research is now on red flag kind of topics, and those research grants are being pulled. Research specifically dealing with disinformation and misinformation, those grants are being revoked. Active research programs, are being revoked, unfortunately, which is a shame, because the findings from the science benefit everybody. They're science. To me, science is truth finding. Science is the closest thing we have to being able to find the truth. And yes, there's bias and subjectivity in science, but when you look at it on the collective whole, and you put together a room full of people who have devoted their lives to studying these things using scientific methods, that's as close as we're going to come to the truth, and so to put barriers in front of that is troubling.
Dr. Henkel, I really appreciate your time. I love to ask people about books. So are there books that you recommend that you just recommend, or that maybe can help equip people to navigate the future with technology and all these deepfakes and stuff like that better?
Oh, that I'm not sure, but I can recommend one of my favorite books about memory and memory errors. So Professor Dan Schachter from Harvard, he has a book called The 7 Sins of Memory. And a couple years ago, it was like the 20th anniversary of it, and he updated it. And so the very first chapters deal with technology and GPS and photo taking and all that stuff. And he is just, first of all, he's just a genius. I mean, this guy's ability, how he sees the world is just so interesting and so clever. And it's so just the notion about how our memories work, and the seven sins of memory, they have benefits, but they also have costs. So the very premise of his book is great. So if you're looking for a pop book that deals with memory, and just the very beginning part that deals with sort of, and in the modern age, look at all the stuff that's going on, and he's so balanced and everything. So it's Dan Schachter's book. I just think it's just a great book.
Awesome. And where can people follow you and keep up with your work and just keep up on all the amazing
Yeah,
work you're doing? Yeah.
I'm terrible about this. I'm on what's Twitter called, X now,
That's
Twitter X Twitter, whatever that is. I am on there, but I don't post all that much. I'm on Blue Sky, and I haven't posted all that much either. But anybody that wants to follow me is welcome to find me on there. It's Linda Henkel. I don't know what my code names are, but on those things. But I'm on both of those things. But I've never. Some of my colleagues, like Ira Hyman, like they have such a presence on those sites. They're always talking about all these wonderful sciencey things. I just I'm a little less present on those things. I lurk. I read.
What are some things that you haven't had a chance to look into yet that you're really excited to in the future?
So some of the work that I started doing and I haven't been able to pick up for a while, I'm really interested in reminiscing about memories, especially for older adults. As people get older and their memories are fading, what helps them get some of the benefits of remembering? So when I talk about memory as medicine, for some older adults, remembering the past is just all they can think about is everybody they love that they've lost, and it's all so much pain. But for other people, they can remember the positive, and it gives them some comfort. It gives them some hope. It gives them a story of their continuity. So I'd really like to find ways that help older adults who are suffering some degree of cognitive impairment and memory loss to be able to look at photos, to be able to share their stories, and to be able to keep and use their memories is medicine, in ways to regulate their emotions. So I have some research that I had started a while back, and then I had to chair the department for 3 years and kind of got put on the side for that. So I'm really looking forward to getting back to that. Research that has an applied focus to it. So I mentioned that one study in the lab, and how artificial it is. I really like things that are closer to, helping people. I think science benefiting people is just so important. So applied memory research is so near and dear to my heart. And so I'd like to get back to some of that stuff.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Henkel, it's been so interesting talking to you today. I really appreciate your time. Anything else you'd like to share before we close up?
No, thank you for all the thoughtful questions. It's really been fun talking with you, and trying to answer what you're asking. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, take care.